Zevlor's Sleep Stories. Performed by Glenn Macready.
The Garden by Ali. There is beauty to the Underdark. I am sure you have heard surface dwellers describe it as a sort of desolate hole in the ground, replete with danger and risk. But there is so much more to it than that. Would you allow me to show you? You may need a moment to adjust to the low light if you are not used to it as I am. Close your eyes. Take a deep, slow breath and settle into the gloom. Let the echoes of water lapping rock shores in some far corner of the cavern wash over you, and if you listen closely, you might hear the chittering of tiny creatures that call these depths home, the hum of their wings as they swoop and swirl above the pools. If you look now, can you see it? From softly glowing luminescent mushrooms to the deep green of the subterranean flora that winds and snakes upward on each and every rock face. There is life in every cavernous reach of the Underdark. Even underfoot is a soft carpet of mosses and lichens and wild flowers that grow in the depths. Take a deep breath and inhale their perfume. A damp, fresh petrichor from every surface that fills the air with its earthy aroma. Surface dwellers are only blessed with such a scent in the brief moments after rainfall. But here it persists. You may have noticed tread-worn patches in the moss, where cold stone beneath peeks through slivers of unusually threadbare plant life. They call these desire paths, trails created by the inhabitants of an area treading the same routes with regularity. This desire path, if you follow it, leads to a plateau atop a hill. Upon this plateau sits a garden, small but teeming with rich plant life. Although it is carefully arranged, there has been no attempt to fight the wildness each specimen here chooses to exhibit. Great bushes bearing thick, waxy green leaves mark the borders, each flanked by brightly colored herbs and creeping vines, holding tiny, jewel-like fruit. Take a deep breath as we step under the trellis and into the threshold. While the petrichor inherent to the Underdark persists, it is also redolent with a herbal fragrance that weaves and winds its way into the senses. Sometimes sweet and floral, and sometimes crisp and almost ozonic, but never unpleasant. At the back of the garden is a small research cabin, tucked away beneath skyward-reaching mushrooms, and covered every inch in ivy and climbing flora. To enter the cabin, you must duck beneath a myriad of brilliant petals. On cooler mornings, dew gathers upon the fronds and risks showering the head of anyone unlucky enough to step beneath with too much haste. We shall instead take our seat at the small bench outside the cabin to rest weary legs and, thankfully, dry heads. And now, I'd like to share with you a story that takes place in this very garden. It was a little over a year ago that I discovered a new plant growing among the herb beds, a small bush with rich green leaves, shiny enough to reflect the soft light from the glowing fungi overhead, bearing a wealth of tiny white flower buds. Naturally, my first instinct was to take a sample to determine its use. Testing proved it to be non-toxic and mildly restorative, with a pleasantly astringent taste. Useful enough, but the find held little relevance for the research I was then working on. I dried the leaves for more stable storage, wrapped them carefully, and placed them in a sealed tin. Now, with a garden such as this, I am sure you would not be surprised to learn I have a rather vast alchemical store with all manner of dried and preserved botanical specimens, and as such, I keep to an accurate and careful labeling system. For this plant, however, I simply wrote unknown, fragrant herb It sat wholly ignored for months, until the vague manner of my notation caught Blurg's attention. I do admit it was not to my usual meticulous standards. Intrigued, he brought it out from the store and set the now open tin upon a table. The leaves within had browned during their time in storage and developed a distinctive fragrance, already mellowed compared to when they had been freshly picked, and with an earthiness that smoothed their earlier astringency. Blurg asked if I had any particular use in mind, to which I admitted I did not. With no further word, he set to work, placing aromatic resins and fragrant wood into the fireplace. Once the fire was roaring, he set a smoking basket above it, into which he carefully arranged the leaves onto a slatted shelf. A spiced smoke suffused the cabin and lingered until the flames died down, and Blurg removed the leaves from the heat. They took on a darker tinge when smoked, and a new fragility that sent them crumbling beneath Blurg's light touch. He placed the fragments into a thin muslin pouch, which he dropped into a pot of boiling water. While an illithid such as myself has fairly specific dietary needs, and I do fear I make a poor taste tester, my palate, naturally, is accustomed to a different fare. I can still appreciate strong flavors and aromatics, especially if prepared with such care by Blurg. It only took a few minutes for the leaves to infuse the water with their essence, and when satisfied, Blurg ladled out 2 servings. In the pot it had appeared dark bronze, but the instant it hit my cup and caught the candlelight, it glowed a liquid amber. Imagine the scent, if you would, mellow and earthy, with the resinous warmth of freshly cut wood and the smokiness of waning embers in a bonfire. It tasted much as it smelled, pleasantly toasted and rich, but with a smooth nuttiness. Before drinking his, Blurg took a spoonful of golden honey and stirred it into the liquid until it dissolved into nothingness. Noticing my curiosity, he held his cup out and offered me a taste. The sweetness of honey tempered any smokiness and replaced it with an almost floral note. Pleasant still, but I prefer a stronger flavor. There is a natural hot spring in an adjacent cavern to where the garden is situated. The crystal clear water within remains heated throughout the year, and the natural flora that grows around the rock pool infuses the water with a herbaceous aroma that soothes the senses. To lie in it is a uniquely pleasant experience, and I have often found myself losing an hour or two after a bout of particularly grueling research. By the time my cup was drained, I found myself in much the same peaceful state. I have since made an attempt to cultivate that particular plant, and if you trace your eyes back down the path by which we came, you will see a number of bushes lining the walkways. From that first plant, we now have a lush thicket of green that provides us with ample study of leaves to be dried and roasted. We've even managed to get hold of a teapot to make brewing it easier. I've become quite the fan. Blurg told me it is called a